Hey there, spooky friends, and welcome to another episode of the Scaryish podcast.
Woo!
I'm Robin Grace. This is Adam Diaz.
Hello.
And we're here with another episode. You know, last week's episode was pretty rough. I had actually written this script last week, thinking that I was going to piggyback off of Adam's, topic, but turns out this is going to be this week's, topic.
So, yeah, that happened. Last week was intense. Thank you to for the outpouring of support from the Spooky Friends community. A lot of folks reached out because I was very unsure about whether or not we should even have that episode go out or not. And people were very kind and said that it was traumatizing but therapeutic to hear, basically, especially for folks who have gone through it. So I do appreciate that from the bottom of my heart, and I sincerely mean it. So also, I apologize. I think it kind of snuck up on people.
Well, I'm going to be covering unicorns this week. So, a little bit uplifting, maybe a little bit hopeful of a topic.
I guess that depends on unicorns and whether or not they're uplifting and hopeful. I will be covering Hollow Earth theory this week. So
I'm excited about this because this is one of the things, one of the topics that I really like is this conspiracy theory about Hollow Earth. So I'm very excited.
It has definitely been on our list to cover for years. It's been on there. So I just decided to just take a stab at it and we'll see what happens. So, but yeah, let's go ahead and just jump into it. F it.
I
think we had a lot of personal conversation about what's going on with our lives last week, so we don't have to do too much of that in the beginning of this episode. I will say we do have a new puppy. I mentioned it at the end of last week's episode. She's doing way better. Her pneumonia treatments ended today, and I'm just hoping that it's smooth sailing from here on out. Knock on wood, we could really use it. That said, let's go ahead and jump into some scary shit. So, Robin, take it away. Regale me with a tale of unicorns.
I don't think unicorns are necessarily scary, right? They are on the ish side of scary-ish.
Hey, man, horses are dangerous. If people don't respect horses, they're crazy. And if you take a horse and you put a spike on it, that's even scarier. So I would qualify as scary-ish.
Well, so I was like, I'm going to do unicorns last week. When I wrote this script, I was like, I'm going to do unicorns because our dog that had passed was our little unicorn, And so I was like, this will be cute. It'll be happy. And that episode was traumatizing. But the idea of unicorns is this rainbow freaking horse, right? Everybody thinks that this magical creature, rainbows come out its bum type thing. And they are definitely interesting. Their origins are interesting. But after researching into it, I'm like, unicorns are far from what they are depicted today.
So, just so I'm clear, because this is what I thought. Unicorns are fake, right? Unicorns are mythological or cryptid. And narwhals are real. Those are real creatures.
Are real.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't think I realized narwhals were real until I was 32 or 33. I saw pictures of them and I just assumed some asshole made an underwater unicorn style thing as fan art, and everyone was just oh, it's cool. And then I realized oh shit, those things actually exist.
Yeah, narwhals are indeed real creatures. I know there are a lot of people out there that are they're not real. There's no way. They are. They're real. I wish I had looked up scientific facts about narwhals because that would be apropos. But if you have never heard of a unicorn, what rock do you live under?
What a sad, lonely existence you have if you've never heard of unicorns.
If you've never heard of a unicorn or seen any iterations of a unicorn, you can just imagine how it's depicted today. Sexy ass horse, usually with a white mane and coat, singular spiral horn coming out of its forehead. People put them on cakes and freaking just oh man, everything is unicorn like designs on it now, right?
I will say unicorn is usually associated with rainbows. I know you mentioned it earlier, like in a lot of the depictions I see, especially in cake form. So I'm curious to see whether or not those two things actually overlap.
So the unicorn has actually been drawn throughout history, and the first depiction of a unicorn dates back to ancient times. And there are literally these Indus stamp seals from the Bronze Age of the Indus Valley civilization that has images of it on it of what looks like a horse with a singular horn coming out of its head, which it by all means looks like a unicorn. And that was around 2600 to 1900 BC. So that is like almost 5,000 years ago or something around there.
I think the farthest back you went was 2600, and I'm pretty sure that's around the same time as like the pyramids were built. So that's a really long time ago. I don't know that off the top of my head. I know that because it's in my script. So
damn it. Okay. Well, it's a really long time ago. And that's crazy for them to be talking about these creatures, right? These mythical horned creatures. Back in the day, it was depicted as either a horse or something a little more goat-like, and I don't think that kind of depiction would be as popular these days if unicorns were goats instead of these majestic horses, right?
Yeah, I envision them as horses. Like goats is like they are the goat of mythological creatures, but they are not a goat. So weird.
I'm just thinking of what goats look like now, and I'm trying to imagine the most beautiful goat with one little horn on it. I can't. It's just
that goat from The Witch. That's a pretty goat. So
yeah. So unicorns actually used to be described as having cloven hooves and occasional goat beards, like the little billy goat beards that grow out of the goat chins. That's where beards grow, out of their chins. But
all beards grow from goat chins and are then moved over.
But it's not as cute, obviously. So I'm so used to seeing unicorns depicted as, like, I've seen it on, again, cakes. People have used it as coat of arms. And they're usually more cute and colorful. Or, like, on Lisa Frank notebooks. I don't know if you've ever had anything done by Lisa Frank, but it was, like, all rainbows and cute animals and sparkles and over the top. Colorful. And, unicorns are one of those creatures you would find on one of those things. But they are always depicted as being beautiful and appealing. And it's just so different from the original goat-esque design, right, of what unicorns possibly were in the past. So back around 2000 BC was when the unicorn had kind of more stout bodies, like something of a cow instead of a horse. Think of like the corgis of unicorns.
A corgi unicorn would be an adorable hybrid, just saying.
A corgi-corn. The horn was also not completely straight, like how it's depicted in all the art we see these days. It was more curved, going up to a tip. So it was like, I guess you could kind of see like a goat horn, how it kind of curves, or I don't know. I'm trying to
like the horn on the nose of a rhino, how it like curves up like that.
We will post pictures on Instagram later. But it's a very unique shape. It's not just a single spirally horn that goes just straight up like we usually see. The ancient depictions of these creatures showed them also wearing like some type of garb or harness or something like that. They had something on them. They weren't like naked white horses running around. And it's thought that these early unicorn renditions were symbols of a powerful, quote, clan or merchant community, end quote. So like a symbol for these types of communities, apparently. Or it may have been some religious symbol of some sort, and it's really difficult to pinpoint what these may have represented, considering it was so long ago. And we're all kind of throwing spaghetti at the wall trying to say like, well, it could have been this or it could have been this. You know what I mean? In South Asia, the unicorn is only seen during this early period of, ancient time. And then it disappears entirely and hasn't really appeared in art since then. But there are depictions of like horned dragons in Asian art, right? And Chinese mythology has what's called like a qilin, I think, which literally looks like a unicorn, but it has scales and stuff that you would kind of relate to a dragon. It has the body of a deer, it has a lion head, and it has scales. And of course, the depiction of this long horn. And, it's pretty much an Eastern Asian dragon / horse type creature. But very similar to a unicorn.
It sounds pretty sexy the way you just described it. If someone came to me like, hey, there's a mythological creature and it's a mixture of a unicorn and a dragon, I'd probably be immediately erect. I'm just saying.
Okay. There's also the Japanese version called the Kirin. Kirin?
Kirin, like the beer.
Oh, yeah, duh. There's also a Japanese version called the Kirin, which is similar to this qilin. The names are very similar. But it's also known as the freaking lightning unicorn from Monster Hunter. Do you remember playing Monster Hunter? There's that one creature where it's literally a unicorn that has lightning coming out of its horn.
I remember most of those creatures. I remember the lightning. I don't think I ever interpreted it as a unicorn for some reason. I don't know. Maybe it's just because I wasn't paying that close attention because I was trying to not die.
Yeah, but it's a horse with a singular horn coming out of its head. And so,
would you say it's a horse of a different color?
Is that a phrase people say?
You haven't seen Wizard of Oz, have you?
No.
Okay, moving on.
Okay. The interesting part about the Chinese iteration is that they were often made out as, they were like made to be symbols of fertility. So these creatures, these dragon unicorn creatures, which I find fascinating. It might be because, the horn on it, right?
I just said, like, if someone described it to me, I'd probably be instantly erect. So I clearly understand what they're talking about.
In a lot of artwork that it actually appears in, they're often seen bringing infants to families, kind of like the stork. So, imagine a unicorn messenger that's just delivering babies.
They clearly hang like the sack that has the baby in it from their horn. Like the stork carries
kind of
it
like
in
the stork
beak,
in the
I
beak.
think. Yeah.
I could see that too. All right. So something that I had no idea about was the fact that unicorns do not appear in Greek mythology, apparently. I did not realize that whatsoever.
Why did you think they did? Because Perseus had
well, there's Pegasus. Wait, is that Greek?
Yeah. Pegasus is Greek, I think, and I'm pretty sure it's just a flying horse, but not a unicorn.
Yeah. And that's what you don't think about the fact like, holy shit, they don't talk about unicorns. They talk about Pegasus. They don't talk about unicorns.
Why weren't we taught that in school? Jesus.
So I thought that was crazy considering all the crazy things that happen in the Greek mythos, right? Apparently, Greek writers wholeheartedly believed in the existence of unicorns, which is why they didn't write like...
Oh, so they didn't put them in because they weren't mythological creatures. They just believed they were real and unicorns were boring. So
what writers did is they wrote about them as part of their natural history. So they wrote about these creatures like it was a part of their natural history, and they believed that these unicorn creatures lived in India, which at the time was a land that seemed pretty far away and fantastical. I know now, not so much. We're like, oh, India, gotcha. South Asia, is it Southeast Asia? Doesn't matter. But yeah, back then they're like, India is so magical. They have these creatures, these unicorn creatures. a man named Theseus wrote a book about India called Indica and described unicorns as these wild asses, fleet of foot, and having a horn a cubit and a half in length, colored white, red at the tip, and black at the base with blue eyes. So,
how long is a cubit?
I'll get there. They were also said to be too bitter to eat.
Bitter? Interesting.
Which is crazy. This information supposedly came from his time in Persia. So while he spent time in Persia, he's like, we came across these freaking unicorn things, dude. They taste like shit, but look at how cool they look. I don't know. And then for those of you that were wondering, like Adam, a cubit and a half is about 28 inches. So that's over 2 feet long. It's pretty long. It's a big ass horn. I'm trying to think of how long 2 feet is in front of me right now. And imagine that just stabbing you. That's scary.
No, I don't want to think about that.
It was thought that by drinking from the horn of a unicorn, it could protect you from stomach trouble, epilepsy, or even poisoning, which is totally holy grail type stuff where it's
I've heard that if you eat the unicorn double barrel special, you'll get a bunch of like bonus augments to your health and vitality from this podcast I listened to called Adventure Zone.
Damn it.
And the unicorn double barrel special is, of course, the horn and the dick. So,
ew. So apparently there are sculptures of unicorns that are found at the ancient Persian capital of Persepolis in Iran, which is crazy that there are actual sculptures, statues of unicorns in these ancient capitals. I had no idea that existed at all. Even Aristotle wrote about a creature called an oryx, which was similar to an antelope. They also wrote about one called the Indian ass, both of which were one-horned animals. And what are the odds that both of these people would write about creatures from India? I think that's fascinating. Other than these, there were also numerous tales of similar-looking creatures, a number of which did come from India. And it really makes me wonder why. Like, why India? You know, were they like, you know, there are these magical creatures and they all happen to come from India?
Maybe it's because India, despite the fact that we know where it's located now, was, for the most part, only accessible by boat. Because if you tried to, like, cross it, if you were on the same continent as it crossed to it, you'd have to go over the Himalayas, which is, like, the largest mountain range on the planet. I would guess that's why, like, India was, like, this mysterious land.
All right, I could see that. I never thought about that.
Plus, everyone knows if you cross the Himalayas, which is, like, what Hannibal did when he was trying to invade Rome, he took his elephants, because he used to ride elephants in the battle. This is totally true. They used to get the elephants drunk and feed them fruit that gave them, like, a skin condition, so they're super irritable, angry, drunk elephants. And that's like how he won a bunch because his cavalry was super famous. He tried to go over the Himalayas and all of his elephants died because they were killed by the Yetis, because everyone knows that if you cross the Himalayas, the Yetis will kill you. So, interesting fact.
Wow. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Some would say that it could stem from the Arabic carcadon or rhinoceros, which would totally make sense from that region, right? So, think about it. Rhinoceros is like this, it's this cow-looking big old creature with one horn coming out of its face.
And it will fuck you right up.
Yeah. I can't imagine they taste good either.
They look like they taste bitter. 100%.
So they even wrote about a creature called the Monasteris, which sounds like rhinoceros. Even more, the Monasteris had the body of a horse, head of a deer, and legs of an elephant, with the tail of a wild pig and a black horn growing out of the middle of its forehead, which all kind of scream rhinoceros to me. A little bit. I mean, it has the legs of an elephant, right? So then come the Middle Ages, and we all know how kinky the medieval times gets, right? So they just took all of these ideas and then turned it on its axis, because that's just what they do, right?
You're saying they. I have no idea who they is. The people in the Middle Ages?
People of the Middle Ages. Depictions of this creature stem from both ancient and biblical sources. So usually a horse, a wild ass, or a goat. And during the Middle Ages, they were just like, let's throw everything together and we're going to make our own stories, I guess. So in a bestiary of the time known as Physiologus, there is a strange tale involving a unicorn and a maiden. No sexy things happen. This unicorn,
this is gonna get weird, isn't it?
This unicorn is trapped by said maiden. Apparently, this maiden was supposed to represent the Virgin Mary in this tale, and the unicorn sees this maiden, lays its head on her lap, and then falls asleep. And kind of like The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, all of this had religious undertones. All these tales of unicorns and maidens and
were they also written by C.S. Lewis? Because that would explain that.
This was, to some, the beginning of the unicorn's appearance in both secular and religious art. Tales were told of unicorns being rare and vulnerable, and some tell of a one-horned beast only being tamed by a virgin. So during the Middle Ages, they were just like, we're going to take this idea that has existed for centuries and gonna make it weird.
Gonna attach religious and sexual significance to it for some reason.
So these I mean, when you look at a unicorn, it's got a big old horn on his face, okay? I'm not surprised. These mysterious creatures grew to be more out of reach and more unbelievable as time went on. And in Europe during the Middle Ages, unicorns kind of became these sacred entities that were thought to have a great intelligence. So some tales of unicorns claimed that they could heal wounds with the touch of their horns.
Or inflict them. It's a goddamn horn.
As time went on, it went from commonly meaning like religious undertone type things to representing chastity and love. It's like all this stuff starts evolving. And then there's this medieval legend of Barlem and Josephat. And in this legend, it represents death instead of all the hopeful things. And it kind of makes sense when you think about Harry Potter and the fact that like when you drink unicorn's blood, you're given a half-life or a cursed life. But I think in that one,
because he was drinking unicorn blood. For those of you who've never read Harry or watched Harry Potter, like the first movie, Voldemort is like creeping around drinking unicorn blood to sustain himself, but it supposedly gives you a half-life. So that doesn't make any fucking sense.
So when you drink it, you're stronger, but you live half as long, or something like that. It depends on what source you're reading on the internet.
Gotcha.
Okay. But that's what I took from the interwebs, is that you just kind of, you gain this temporary strength, which is what he needed. He needed enough strength to, be able to take back what he was owed or whatever Voldemort wanted in life. Because he's a fucking loser. Anyway, so these unicorns are like half good, half bad. And it's kind of just this changing of the legend of the unicorn. Unfortunately, to differ from Harry Potter, the traditional method of hunting a unicorn involved entrapment by a virgin. Unless Voldemort was a virgin, in which case it all makes sense, or Quirrell was a virgin, or whatever.
Entrapment by a virgin, so basically the virgin has to be a cop and then not tell the unicorn they're a cop?
They're a cop, yep.
Okay, got it.
No, so the it's like the maiden story. So they create like a ring to trap the unicorn in. And, you stick the chick inside, or the guy, or whatever virgin you choose, and stick it inside, and the unicorn comes to said person.
And the unicorn says in like that deep voice, like, "Are you a cop?" And then, boom.
No, I'm trying to think of the line from 50 Shades where it was like,
"Oh, God.
Where have you been?"
I don't know what line you're referring to, and I don't want to know.
No, it's where he like finds out she's a virgin, and then he's like, "You're still a virgin?" And she's like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Where have you been?" And she's like, "Waiting," or some shit. I don't remember. Anyway.
Oh man, you just changed my life with that dialogue. Thank God you reminded me.
You're welcome. Anyway, in Harry Potter, he just grabs one way too easily. And so regularly to kind of sustain himself. So it's weird. Anyway, Leonardo da Vinci wrote about capturing unicorns, apparently, which is odd. I have never heard this before, and I find it fascinating. But he wrote, quote, "The unicorn, through its intemperance and not knowing how to control itself for the love it bears to fair maidens, forgets its ferocity and wildness, and laying aside all fear, it will go up to a seated damsel and go to sleep in her lap, and thus the hunters take it," end quote. So this tale of capturing a unicorn is actually depicted in art in a lot of ways through the ages, and whether that be with the maiden in the center of a ringed fence, or, you know, it's just sad. It's like controlling this beautiful creature, but lots of art with a woman and a unicorn together kind of thing. Even Shakespearean scholars wrote about unicorns, that in order to capture the unicorn, hunters would goad it into charging them so that it would get its horn stuck in a tree. And all these tales of capturing unicorns is so sad. Like, what if they were real? What if unicorns did exist, but they hunted them into extinction before we were ever able to see it?
That is very believable.
And what's even sadder is, like, because of legends of unicorns, people started hunting rhinoceros and narwhals for their horns and tusks in order to make these, you know, magical cups to drink from. Especially during the freaking Middle Ages, you weirdos, when everybody wanted protection from poisoned drinks. So it's just really depressing that a lot of these endangered animals, I mean, came from stupid stories like this. Not that unicorns are stupid, but you know. One of the reasons rhinoceros are so endangered is because they get hunted for their horns. And it's just real fucking sad. People even sold fake unicorn powder, like unicorn horn powder, to people. So these horns became literally worth their weight in gold. And it's just real depressing because I think one of the rhino species went extinct in 2020.
The white albino, was it?
Yeah,
I can't remember.
Not an albino one, but the white rhinoceros, I think, is now extinct. It'll
come back. Life finds a way.
I mean, it's not spliced with certain DNA that's just going to bring it back to life. What is it? Frog DNA? There have been a lot of fish
that have been declared extinct that wind up like washing up on the shore, and people are like, "Holy shit, there's still these fish." So you never know. Life finds a way.
So whether the existence of unicorns was real or not, storytellers have always taken liberties with them, and they each took the idea of something and then wrote it in a way that kind of suited what they were trying to portray. And whatever lessons they were trying to tell, these myths can just literally shape who or what a time or place was like. And you look at the Greek and Egyptian mythos, unicorns were just such a small part of these larger entities. And I mean, other than Greek, because they totally thought that shit was real. But these days, unicorns represent like magic and fantasy, and it's something unreachable and rare, and it's too beautiful to actually exist because our world fucking sucks and everything is gross and disgusting.
Wow.
But perhaps some type
it's going to be less depressing.
Perhaps some type of creature similar may have existed at one point, but now they're just imaginary and kind of used as a symbol of hope or faith or purity, stuff like that. And I say you do you and believe in what makes you guys happy. You know, if you want to believe in unicorns, you believe in unicorns and you go do that. Because sometimes all we need is just something to believe in, even if it is seemingly impossible. Go be a unicorn.
Wow. Right on. That was inspiring at the end, Robin. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Fuck poachers.
Wow. For serious. Like, it could have been something that actually existed but was hunted to extinction. I think that's a total possibility when it comes to basically any creature that seems similar to one that currently exists. And that's sad to think about. But either way, I love unicorns. Not afraid to admit it. All right. Before we move on to my topic, we're going to take a quick commercial break. So this week, I decided that I wanted to finally cover a conspiracy theory that we've kind of been avoiding. And by we, I mean I. I'm not sure if Robin's been avoiding it or she just wanted to cover other stuff. But as I've said in previous episodes, I don't really like to cover conspiracy theories too much. I don't know about Robin. Have you covered a conspiracy theory in the past or just not really?
Have covered, I think I covered like D.B. Cooper. That's kind of like a conspiracy theory.
But that's more of like a whodunit, how did he do it type of thing.
Yeah, but there are so many conspiracies, revolving that whole
right,
event.
This is a bit different. Like the people who believe in conspiracy theories that are like large ones, like big, not just about like a singular event or person, they tend to be giant assholes to anyone who tries to view this conspiracy theory from a skeptical, logical, or practical lens. And that said, if you happen to be someone who buys into this particular conspiracy theory of Hollow Earth, that's totally fine. No judgment, but don't be a jerk and don't fucking at me if you don't like what I say, because I'm just trying to figure out what the actual theory here is. And then if there's been tests to, see whether or not it's real, and then I'll give you my candid thoughts. That's basically how this thing is going to unfold.
I want to know the deepest point humankind has ever dug into the earth.
And I'll tell you, because I know that, because I do good research. So, first and foremost, I want to go ahead and say that this could all be bullshit. Standard disclaimer, putting it up front. I am only familiar with this theory after having just heard it in passing, and then, of course, seeing it on the documentary Godzilla, King of the Monsters, where they discuss where Godzilla lives.
Damn it.
So if you haven't seen that movie, I won't spoil the whole thing except for that part. Yes, the earth is hollow in that. This also comes into play when it comes to Kong versus Godzilla, which is another Godzilla movie, Avi. And if you haven't seen that one, I just spoiled that tiny part to it, but realistically it happens like super quick. And that movie's just all about the big ape fighting the radioactive laser lizard. I'll go into the science behind the experiments that have been done to try and prove or disprove the Hollow Earth theory, but that's how I'm going to wrap up. Let's start at the beginning. So if you're wondering who came up with the Hollow Earth, it really does go back quite a long time. Basically, any religion or belief structure that had a version of a pit or an underworld or hell or Green Bay treats that place as though it exists below the surface of the earth and is filled with all manner of horrors in most cases. The idea of this particular realm being beneath our feet was typically associated with some form of afterlife as far back in human history as you can basically go. One has to wonder if the reason that is the case is because humans have generally for around 130,000 years, dating all the way back to Neanderthals, buried our dead. Not everyone does this. Not every culture believes in it, but quite a few do. The majority do. And for a very long time. Like I just said, 130,000 years ago. Like, y'all remember 128,000 BC, right? It's a period called the Eemian period. Pretty sure I said that wrong, which was basically like a warm spot between ice ages. So mastodons were still a thing. Neanderthals were cruising around lots of different places. There was an article that released a couple of years ago, I think, that said that they found Neanderthal bones dating back to this particular period in California when it wasn't thought Neanderthals were in North America at all. So we're still figuring shit out there. And I'm pretty sure around that time, the aliens were building the pyramids, as we all know. Just kidding about that one. That happened in 2500 BC. Duh. So
so that's why you knew.
Yeah, even 130,000. I googled when were the pyramids built. It said 2500 BC. So that's when the aliens did it. Even 130,000 years ago, these Neanderthals were known to bury their dead. And we've discovered burial sites that date back to that time that show this. So it's natural to think that when a human being dies, especially if it's 130,000 years ago, and the instinct is to basically cover their body with earth, there's a natural general association of putting them below the ground and then linking that when people start developing things like the idea of an afterlife, where somehow a part of the afterlife would be below our feet, because that's where people are consigned when they die. Hollow Earth theory, however, isn't about an afterlife, not really. And that's just some of the origins of the concept of a world beneath our feet. Like before, it really kind of used to be abstract in the idea of the pit or hell or whatever. And lots of cultures believe that there are creatures that came from deep within the earth. And like in Mexico, folks think that there are evil creatures that emitted from deep within the earth that are like demons or devils that can be found within Mexico. I'm going to try and say this right, Trapezind Islands, which is a chain of islands north of Australia, to give you an idea of where it's at. It's actually part of Papua New Guinea. They believe that the creatures that emerged from the earth are their ancestors. They think that the creatures that emerged from this civilization within the earth through the cave system that led them to the surface became them through years of evolution. The Mandan Native Americans from the Midwest of the United States of America on the other side of the planet, they also believe their ancestors lived in a land beneath the surface of the earth and came to the surface via caves, and that's where they're descended from. Likewise, with Native Brazilians, we're going to the southern hemisphere now, who believe their ancestors came from the underground lands, and that there are still many people who live in the underground lands, and they look similar to us.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, the Hopi Native American tribe, I hope I'm saying it right, it's either Hopi or Hopi, Native Americans, which are from the southwest areas of the United States, like Arizona, have an interesting belief as well. There's a thing called a saipipu, which I think I'm saying correctly, which is a small hole or indentation in the floor of like think of like a town hall. It's called a kiva, and a kiva is a spot where rites and rituals or like important meetings are held for these particular people. And in that spot, it almost, like, not to be a dick, it almost looks like a toilet. Like, I've seen a lot of pictures, and I thought legitimately like, oh, a kiva is probably like, some form of plumbing or whatever. But no, this is like an important meeting site where they can do rites and rituals and like determine strategy for how to lead the tribe or whatever. But the reason they have this small hole or indentation in this very important room is it is a symbol of a portal that they believe their ancestors came from when they first emerged into the surface world from the like world below. Like, they sincerely believe that. And I mean, I'm not saying everyone that's part of that Native American tribe sincerely believes that, but that's part of their belief structure. They also believe in that particular tribe that the Grand Canyon has one of these sapipus, and that is an entrance to the actual underworld. So if you can find this one in the Grand Canyon, you can find the entrance to the underworld. So
someone has to make a horror movie about that.
Yeah, I wouldn't be shocked if there hasn't already been stuff made about this. But all that to say, lots of people from all over the world hold this not just as a belief, but as a core part of their origin, that there is some sort of civilization that lives beneath the surface of the world. So when did this go from folklore into science/conspiracy theory eventually? It's debatable. So might have started in 1595, 1596. There's a weird line in, I think it's A Midsummer Night's Dream that Shakespeare wrote. And it's something about the earth being hollow all the way through.
Man, Shakespeare was all about that.
It kind of sounds like it's being sarcastic. I read the line and I was like, this sounds like the person, like in Game of Thrones, where like she asks, like, when will my husband be better? And the chick's like, oh, when the sun rises in the west and sets in the east, when the mountains like blow away with the wind and crumble to dust, that type of thing. That's sort of what the line sounds like. It's like, I'll believe this when the earth is hollow kind of thing. But it's, of course, in like the old English speak, so it's very hard to interpret. That's one of the earliest literary references. That said, a lot of people credit Hollow Earth theory to a guy named Edmund Haley, and he spoke about it in 1692. You're probably saying, who the fuck is Edmund Haley and why do I care about this? One, because you're listening to the episode and you're a nice person. And two, because Edmund Haley was an English astronomer, geophysicist, mathematician, meteorologist, and physicist. He was a Renaissance man.
What Haley's Comet is named after?
He was a professional smart guy, so it's probably a good bet there. He was a well-renowned smart guy, too. He was the second astronomer royal in Britain, which is a position within the government that basically says you're the bestest, better than all the restest astronomers in all of the lands. And he had lots of accurate things he observed and measured in the stars. He is the guy who observed Halley's Comet, and not only that, but figured out in the 1600s the frequency that it would come by the Earth, which was accurate. And because of that, they named it after him. Like, Halley's Comet is Edmund Haley's fucking comet. It's his. And when he saw it, he figured out how frequently it would show up. And they still use that calendar to this day when you're saying, like, hey, when's the next time Halley's Comet's going to be around? You can thank this guy because he figured it out using math because he was fucking smart.
That's creepy. Like, how do people do that?
I don't know. Like, the Mayans were really good astronomers, too. And that was way, way back in the day. I think they only had, like, 56K dial-up when they were existing.
Shut up.
Now that you know that Edmund Haley isn't some crackpot jagoff, I can tell you about one of his other theories, and that is that in 1692, Edmund Haley conjectured that the Earth might be hollow, like it might be a shell that has a hollow sphere inside it. And part of his theory was that there were two inner shells and a core. And if you're like, what the fuck does that look like? The best way I can like put this to you is like, imagine if it's a 2D image of it, so it's just a circle and that's the Earth. But imagine a bullseye. You know, you have like your center, that's the bullseye, that's a solid color. And then like a ring around that, a ring around that, and a ring around that. That is essentially like each ring is like the crust. It's like the surface. And then each layer between the crusts is like an atmosphere where that's hollow Earth. Like that's where people live basically, or like creatures live or whatever the fuck it could be. But this was something he put forth and posited like, you know, this could be something. And he didn't just do this to fuck around. He wasn't just like, I'm going to get on Twitter and say some controversial shit. Like, no, he thought that the reason this was happening is because he thought if the Earth was composed that way, each ring within the Earth was rotating in a different direction, and it would have explained to him some of the bizarre readings that he was getting when he was running different experiments where compasses were malfunctioning in ways that could not be explained by the science of that time. So he also thought that there would be an atmosphere between these layers and that some of that gas would escape through the cracks in the Earth, and that gas escaping from the other atmospheres was what caused the northern lights of the aurora borealis in the sky. Was it was basically like escaping and being emitted up into the atmosphere and then sort of like scattering on top of our sky. Obviously, we know that's not what happens. That's not what causes the aurora borealis. But that was his theory. He was wrong about that. It's not like he's an idiot, but he was wrong about that. So it's kind of funny when you think about the fact that hollow Earth theory is really kind of different nowadays. And I really wondered when I got into the hollow Earth topic whether or not this would overlap with the idea that there's something going on with the cave system all over the world. So for those of you who don't know about this and who don't live in the United States, there's a really creepy meme or like infographic that you can find online. I'm going to try and find it and post it to our Instagram and Facebook. And what it is, it's a map of the United States. And one of them is a map that shows like via dots all over the map, like the frequency with which people disappear in the United States and are not seen from again. And then the overlay on top of that is the cave system of the United States. And it's very terrifying how the frequency with which people disappear correlates to how close they are to the cave system of the United States of America. Like, it is really, really creepy how much those two maps match up. Like, you could basically identify where caves exist without the cave map. And so that's something I was really curious to see if it overlapped with this, because like if there's an underground society and hollow Earth and all that, maybe it'll connect to the fact that that's an actual thing. Like that's statistically showing there's a correlation. It's not like causation necessarily, but there's certainly a correlation, which is very, very creepy. So
is it colder there, do you think, or warmer because they're closer to the Earth's core?
I have no fucking clue. They all have their own atmosphere, so who knows? So this is the other thing. It wasn't just Haley who thought this either. Like a lot of people give him credit for being the one who kind of kicked off the idea. But like if you kick off an idea and some people are not able to disprove it, people will start developing alternate theories based off of it. So there's a guy named Leclerc Milfort who in 1781 actually took hundreds of indigenous people in the southeastern part of the United States of America to a series of caves near the Red River. These indigenous people are the Muskegee, who also believe that their ancestors emerged to the surface the same way a lot of the other cultures I already told you about did, where they came out of this cave system that connected to the inner Earth civilization. Now, Milford thought the cave system that they were trying to discover could, quote, easily contain 15,000 to 20,000 families, end quote. So, like, he thought there was, like, a full civilization in this cave system that he was going to discover. There's also like some guy who was like a sailor who supposedly went to the North Pole. And when you look up his actual life's accomplishments, it doesn't say anything about Hollow Earth, but like Hollow Earth folks in certain websites like say that he discovered the Hollow Earth, I think at the North or South Pole. I forget which one. But I couldn't find like anything within his own like writings that said that. It was just, it's like Witwicky from fucking Transformers where they're like, oh, he found Megatron, but he went crazy. It's like that kind of theory where it's like, just, there's not a lot of evidence to support it, but I mean, Megatron was real. That's why they built the Hoover Dam. We all know that exists. So
what?
I mean, have you never watched Transformers? Jesus Christ.
Oh my god.
So one of the alternate theories regarding Hollow Earth came from a guy named Leonard Euler, who proposed that there was a single shell Hollow Earth. So not the bullseye target thing that I described, but basically a shell within the Hollow Earth that was one of them, not multiples, and that there was a small sun at the center of our planet. I think the planet actually does have a core that's like liquid hot magma. So he wasn't like super far off. It's not the craziest shit that anyone's ever said. And he did say that in the mid to late 1700s. So even though Hollow Earth wasn't really like narrowing down and trying to figure out what's actually happening within the Earth, that was very plausible. And to this day, like people still think that that is what's at the center of our planet. They don't call it like a small sun, but it's built up of very similar stuff. So there's also this other theory. So there's a lot of Hollow Earth theories, and you're probably like, holy shit. Yeah, there's this other theory called Concave Hollow Earth, which I thought I'd share with you because it's one of the craziest things I've seen. So this theory states that we don't actually live on the surface of the Earth. So if you like make a circle with your hands and you think like this is the Earth and you're looking at it, you would imagine you're walking on the outside of your hands. You know what I mean? Like that's where we live.
Right.
Concave Hollow Earth states that if you make a circle, where we live is the inside of your hands. So that's still the crust. Your hands are still the crust, but concave hollow Earth is that the Earth is this giant, massive mass, and we live inside it. So when you look up, you're actually looking towards the center of it, which is what our sky is basically. And that makes like zero fucking sense when you think about like, you know, space exploration, because if you were to fly straight up in concave Earth theory, you would come down on the other side of the planet technically, which is not what happens. So even for like flat earthers, that's not what happens, which is very interesting to me. So concave hollow Earth is just super, super weird shit.
I had never heard of that theory before, and I think is dumb.
Yeah, this is the one where I was just like, we're starting to get towards like the flat Earth theory stuff where like when someone said, you know, if you travel in one direction on the Earth, you'll eventually get back to where you left, which means the Earth can't be flat. And because they can't disprove that, and they can actually prove that, they develop theories on why that is while the Earth remains flat. So it's like they have to bend their bullshit to accommodate for facts that they can't account for that disprove flat Earth. And the theory they came up with that got really popular was Pac-Man Theory, which is where if you have a flat Earth and you get to the edge and you fall off, you don't actually fall off. You just teleport to the other side of the Earth and keep going, like in the game Pac-Man when you go off the side of the map. So that's the concave Earth theory one for me. So at this point, I'm going to stop telling you about the variations of hollow Earth because there's a fuck ton. Like giants living on one level, mole men living on another. I think South Park talked about crab people. There's a lot of people who think that there's reptile or lizard people that live beneath the surface. That's
the one I'm used to.
That one's fucking crazy because that one involves them running our governments, which is like, if they live inside the Earth, why the fuck do they care about surface world? But there are so many hollow Earth theories, and they've all spun off of one or another, and they've really spun off of fictional work and pop culture from the last several centuries, because once this theory was kind of thrown out there, it got picked up by a lot of science fiction writers or people who just like to write like fictional adventures like Journey to the Center of the Earth by Jules Verne, like things like that, where it's like the Earth is hollow and there's like a world beneath our feet. So
there's literally an episode of Doctor Who about the lizard people from the center
I remember.
of the Earth. Like,
and one of them becomes his companion or like someone who's a recurring character too. So instead of going over a bunch of other alternate theories, we all get the fucking point. The Earth is hollow in one way or another, and there's things that live below us. So let's talk about experiments that have been done to determine whether or not the Earth is hollow and whether or not there's any shocking results. Now, I'm not going to pretend like I understand the science of this as much as one really needs to. But there was a guy named Pierre Bougie, I don't know if I'm saying his name right, and Charles-Marie de la Condamine, who went to a volcano in Ecuador in 1735. They were very smart people. They conducted what is called a vertical deflection experiment. Now you may be asking, Adam, what is a vertical deflection experiment? Well, dear listener, I don't really fucking know. I don't know what the experiment consists of. I think you just pee in the volcano from what I understand. But what it's actually doing, what that experiment is intended to do, is to determine how the local mass affects gravitational pull, because those are things you can measure. You measure density of something, and you can measure gravitational pull, because for those of you who don't know, gravity works differently depending on where you are on the planet. Not so significantly that you can bounce around like you're on the fucking moon, but there's certain parts of Canada especially where gravity actually works differently. So I don't know what the actual experiment is that they did, but what I do know is that the result from it, which they did publish and is widely accepted by the scientific community, basically disproves that Hollow Earth could ever be a thing. I don't know how. And because of that, it is something that I can't say to you shows you that Hollow Earth is not a thing, because it's not actually showing you, because we don't understand. Another thing that is widely accepted by the scientific community is how seismic waves work, which is something that we have a general grasp of. A seismic wave is essentially a measurement of seismic activity, or the earth moving. You know, everyone can understand what a fucking earthquake is, you know? Everyone's seen tremors. We know what a seismograph is. It's a needle on a piece of paper that shakes like a fucking lie detector test, okay? So if you have one on one spot on the planet and one on a different spot on the planet, and there's a big fucking earthquake, regardless of where it is, you can say, okay, here was the intensity based off of our measurement in this spot, and here's the intensity in the other spot. And you can say, how long did it take for the wave to travel? And that's basically how we can quantify data of a seismic wave. I think we can all follow that pretty well, right?
Yeah.
So through math, through the mathematics, we can figure out how long it takes for a wave to go from one point to the other. We can reproduce those results on smaller scale objects in an experiment to determine the density of certain things, such as the Earth. Because if you want to determine how long it takes for a seismic wave to travel across either something's surface or through something, which is what they do determine when it comes to seismic waves, you can determine its density. And when you do that, you can basically completely and utterly disprove that the Earth is in any way, shape, or form hollow. This doesn't disprove the layered theory where it's like it could travel through solid Earth and then get to a like blank spot and then get to solid Earth again if there is in some way like connections like canals or caves or whatever, you know? But it does disprove full hollow Earth theory because it's just simply not possible based off of the math. I would like again to state that if you don't trust science or any of this or math, there's really nothing I can say to you that's going to make you believe the Earth is not hollow. And I would like to again state that if you don't trust science or any of that, don't at me, because I don't want to hear what you have to say. So the last thing that the scientific community fully supports as disproving of hollow Earth theory is something that I think we've all heard of, called gravity. The force of gravity on a specific object and its size can be measured. There's a lot of experiments you can watch on Mythbusters that'll show you how you measure gravity, which is just basically measuring how fast things fall. You can also compare whether or not gravity exists within a vacuum by sucking all the air out of it and comparing two objects that weigh completely different weight and dropping them at the same time, because within a vacuum with no air resistance, they should drop at the exact same pace, which they do. On Mythbusters, they drop a bowling ball and some feathers, and they drop perfectly at the exact same amount of time. So the other thing we can measure with gravity is density, because if something has a specific amount of gravity, it means it's a specific level of dense. We can observe that everywhere. In particular, the best example of density versus gravity is a black hole. Black holes are actually very small objects in space, but they're incredibly dense. Their mass is insanely high, despite the fact that they don't take up a lot of space like a star would.
How do you
they have gravity
measure the mass?
That traps light. What's that?
How do you measure the mass on a black hole?
You can basically try and measure based off of the absence of light how big a black hole might be. Like, you can just look up based off of like the observations how big they believe specific black holes are. And it's like they measure the gravitational fields versus the size of the object. So when you measure things like that, which is very complicated math, I'm not trying to pretend like it's easy and that everyone should just fucking take out a pen and just doodle it on the back of their hand or anything. But when you measure that, you can take an object like the Earth, which we can determine how wide the Earth is, and through just basic math of, okay, it's a fucking circle. If you can get over the flat Earth bullshit and say, okay, it's a fucking circle, we can figure out radius based off of circumference and diameter based off of circumference. So we say, okay, it's this big. It has this much gravity. We can measure how much gravity our planet has. So then we say, okay, could it have this much gravity if it's hollow? And the answer is no. The answer is just flat out no. And then the other part of it is, if we can measure how much gravity the Earth has, which we can, I'm not going to read you the number because I didn't write it down. If you can measure how much gravity the Earth has, you can actually say, hey, if the Earth is hollow, could it withstand the gravity that is being exerted on every single thing on the fucking planet? And the answer to that is no. If the Earth were hollow, it would crumble under the weight of its own gravity, which wouldn't be what it is if it were hollow. So hollow Earth theory, if you look at it from the perspective of like the Earth is fucking giant levels of hollow with atmospheres underneath it, that is basically complete bullshit and is disproved. If you look at it as it's a series of massive caves and caverns that can support life underneath the planet's surface, that's more believable. Different. That's probable. Or I should say that's plausible. Like, they just found a sinkhole in China that basically has its own atmosphere, except that it's open ceiling. You know, they can see the sky. If you were, like, in a cave, like anyone who's been in a cave, like gone on a cave tour, when they turn out the lights, it's pure darkness, you know? But there is bioluminescent shit that could exist, but you're not going to have, like, your own atmospheric sky. So, the last thing that hollow earthers that accept all of those things say is there is only one way to be certain, because math can be fallible, because people can fuck it up, and not a lot of people like to check stuff. But, I mean, they do. Scientific community loves to check stuff and tell other people they're wrong. But one of the things they say is that there's only one way to be certain whether or not the Earth is hollow, and you can probably guess what that is. It's to drill a fucking hole through the Earth and check. So I think it's hilarious that, like, even if I 100% understood every piece of the science and math that I just told you, that I spent the entire episode breaking down, I can never be 100% sure unless they were to actually do something that was simple enough for me to really tangibly understand. And I think that's why a lot of folks come back to just drill a fucking hole through the entire Earth and then we'll fucking find out. So there's a place on the border of Russia and Norway called the Kola Superdeep Borehole. This is a former Soviet Union project, and the entire purpose of it was to drill a hole as deep into the planet as we humanly could.
Is it still functioning?
No, they have not continued to drill, but they started doing it on May 24th, 1970. By 1979, it was officially the deepest man-made hole in the history of mankind. While drilling, they kept track of the material they went through, and at no point did they ever hit an underground society or hollow earth. Maybe they hit some small pockets of, like, abscess or whatever, like, you know, what a cave would be. Like, if you watched Armageddon every now and then, they just aren't drilling through the asteroid, but they never drilled into what is called hollow earth. Now, if you're measuring depth from the surface, it is still the deepest hole drilled on the planet. There's, like, another way you can measure it, where it's not actually the deepest thing. I think if you're like drilling at an angle, like how long the hole is, there's an oil well that's actually a longer hole. But as far as depth into the Earth goes, this thing is still number one. Its depth is 40,320 feet, or 12,262 meters for those of you who use the metric system. That is over 7.6 miles deep into the Earth.
Is it hot in there?
Probably. I would imagine so. But if you're thinking, like, is it hot because it's so close to the core of the Earth is 4,000 miles in diameter. So if you're sitting there as a hollow earther and you're like, hey, you got to drill all the way through the planet for me to believe you, then there's still another 3,992.4 miles to go. So that's probably not going to happen anytime soon. What I find most interesting about the research I've done is that so many folks during the original scientific hypothesis from the 1600s who thought maybe Hollow Earth is a thing. When they proposed it, they did it like scientists do, as a theory that needed to be tested. It's just a hypothesis, you know? It's not a certainty. And you almost never propose something in science as a certainty unless it's something that's obvious and it just needs to be quantified. Through science fiction and conspiracy theories, and let's be honest here, bullshit, the certainty of Hollow Earth for some folks is damn near absolute. Some people believe this shit so deeply, they would probably physically assault me or kill me if they actually heard what I'm saying. I don't think they'll listen to our show, but if they do, I'll be like public enemy number one. Like, he's definitely on the lizard people payroll, or he's fucking one of them. Like, they 100% believe in Hollow Earth, despite the fact that people that came up with it were like, this could be a thing. Probably not, but maybe. Who knows? Like, somehow that has evolved into, like, I will kill someone to kill those reptile bastards who run our goddamn corrupt governments. And me personally, I don't think the Earth is hollow. Like I said, maybe there's a bunch of fucking caves and it's deeper than we ever know. Maybe the governments actually know that the caves are, like, really fucking intricate and very, very dangerous. And that's why we see stuff like disappearances around those things. But realistically, until we can 100% tangibly, absolutely prove the Earth is not hollow, people are never going to stop believing it. Especially with how popular something like the flat Earth theory is again. When we can prove that shit, like, you can 100% prove the Earth is round. My favorite thing is to watch flat earthers on YouTube try and prove that the Earth is flat and accidentally prove that it's round, and then watch the cognitive dissonance in their face when they're like, I can't accept the result of the experiment I just claimed would prove the truth. So now I need to figure out how the experiment is flawed, despite the fact I know it's not, so I can continue believing my bullshit. The fact those people exist, and there's so many of them, makes me know Hollow Earth is going to be around for a very fucking long time. It's already been around for 400 to 500 years.
I feel like some people are just into that theory because they just want to be a part of the drama.
There is a specific mindset of people that have to believe something different than what other people believe, because it means they can tell themselves they're right. And if they're right and everyone else is wrong, that means they're smarter than other people. And that's how people get pulled into believing things that are clearly and obviously fucking bullshit. That's how conspiracy theories and cults get ground, is because they're like, hey, do you want to know the truth? And when they suggest that they're going to tell you the truth, that means that what you're believing is lies. So all you have to do is believe, and then you're smarter than everyone else. You didn't even have to read up on something. All you had to do is believe something someone else told you rather than learn. And then when you actually try and learn and you run into fact and you have to sit there and say, this can't be right. There's something seriously wrong. And there's so many folks like that with conspiracy theories, which is why I sincerely hate covering them on the show. I cannot wait to see the ads I get for this and how many times I have to block people, because I'm just going to be like, block, 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 block. But I'm going to put it out there. Who knows? I can't prove Hollow Earth is not a thing to you. I just can't. So maybe it is. Maybe it isn't. If it is, maybe rent is cheaper down there. Maybe we could actually afford a house down there. And of all the crazy shit I've told you about, I think that is the least likely thing that I have said on the show. So that, my spooky friends, is the Hollow Earth theory.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
That is definitely one that is interesting to me. The digging of the big ass deep hole is what's interesting to me.
I was trying to figure out why they stopped. And I think they kept going basically until the USSR collapsed, because I noticed that they had updated readings on that hole until like 1989, which is when the Soviet Union collapsed. So I think when the Soviet Union collapsed, they're like, the country, whatever is no more. We don't have any money. Who's going to keep drilling the hole? Everyone's like, fuck that. And they just like walked away from the
I'm sure
drill.
there's a point too where these materials, these man-made materials, can no longer penetrate into the earth without melting. Or
all you need to do is go to that oil rig and get Bruce Willis and Steve Buscemi and Ben Affleck, and they can penetrate anything. So, yeah.
Damn it. There's so many kids out there who are like, I'm too young for Armageddon. I don't know
watch Armageddon. It's a pretty good bad movie. So
I don't want to close my eyes.
That's a lie. You do. And so do I. We both really want to close our eyes. So it's an exhausting time in our lives, and I can't wait to sleep. But I sincerely do hope that you enjoyed episode 239. If you have any stories you would like to send our way, could be about Hollow Earth or unicorns, could be about anything supernatural, paranormal, coincidental, true crime, extraterrestrial, spiritual, whatever, feel free to reach out to us by emailing storytime@scaryish.com or go to our website, scaryish.com, click on Contact Us, fill out that form. It comes directly to us. Or you can go to facebook.com/scaryish-podcast, at Scaryish
Twitter.shit.
At Scaryish Pod on Twitter and at Scaryish Podcast on Instagram. Please feel free to reach out to us. If it's a Hollow Earth theory and you're respectful, I am more than happy to read it. I don't necessarily think I'll engage, but who knows, man? You can reach out. I'm always up for reasonable and respectable discourse. Robin, for folks who would like to donate to us, how can they do so?
You can go to patreon.com/scaryish-podcast. Those are monthly donations. Tiers start at $1. I just finished packing up all the Badge of Honor patron and above rewards for the summer. Finally, thank goodness. And so those will get mailed out this week. And yes, if you want your hands on that, join Meow. And if you're not into the monthly donation thing, you can go to ko-fi.com/scaryish-podcast, and all your donations go to helping us keep on going.
Indeed. So thank you to everyone who listens and supports us. We appreciate all of you. We can feel that support and that love, and it does mean the world to us. That's everything we have for episode 239. So Robin, go ahead and sign us out.
Keep on creeping on, and we'll talk to you guys later.
Bye-bye.